Okay, so we're started recording. Okay, so we're gonna go over first we'll go over a couple little things in the customer module, and then we'll go to projects and look at basically the same thing and go to users. Actually, as I'm reading this, we'll start out in preferences. So you can think of a lot of features in general in a computer when it comes to privileges as a hallway with open doors or closed doors. And so, for example, if you want to go through a hallway and there's 5 different doors that you have to go through, if any one of them is closed, then you can't go through the hallway or locked. But if they're all open, then you can go all the way through. So with that understanding, closing any one door can stop you. This is somewhat similar in that there's a hierarchy. So it's not a matter of getting through or not, but as you want a feature to work, the feature is first set in one place more broadly. So where we stand as a user, and then we can narrow that down and we can change that setting, some settings specifically for a customer. So anytime we bring up that customer, that setting will come into effect. And then sometimes we want to change that setting specifically on a project. So that's a hierarchy. So if we ever change it in a project, it'll override anything in the customer or in our regular company preferences. If we override it in a customer, it'll override what's in our preferences, but then we can always still change it on a project. Okay, so let's take a look at that, and that pertains to pricing. So what we have 2 fields here called overtime and on-site. So overtime is to bill the customer overtime on a project, and crating, it's not unusual to do crating on-site. So something maybe can't be moved until it's crated, or there's just too much stuff. It doesn't make sense to move it to the crating company, so you have to go to the customer's plant and crate up the equipment there. So you'll do it on-site. And those 2 things are typically charged extra for. And the title of those, typically a lot of companies call them overtime and on-site. But some companies don't want to call it that. They want to just call it surcharge. Or there are cases when in a corporate environment, the person who's buying the crates maybe didn't buy them when he was supposed to, didn't buy them early enough, so he had to buy them to get built on the weekend. And the crating company, our user, said, well, we've got to charge you overtime for that. But the customer's boss says, we won't ever pay for overtime. I don't pay for overtime. So we give them different ways of handling that. Now, if a company doesn't like to, they want to sell themselves differently, they can just not use the term overtime. So they can call this surplus, and we could call this rapid service, meaning, that doesn't fit too well, which is really really on-site crating. So we're saying, oh, we'll go there right now and crate it for you. So it's faster, and we charge extra for it. So a company could call those whatever they want. Now from there, let's go into customers. And in the customer, we have these also. So again, now we put something in preferences. Now we can override it by a customer. Now you notice this one, the on-site, it says rapid service, and it's a little bit gray, meaning that now is the default if we don't put anything in. And this says surcharge. Well, we already called that surcharge for this customer. I'm sorry, surplus, what I put in preferences. That probably should have been surcharge. Surplus is the wrong word. So let's say we put surplus or surcharge in the preferences, then that would be the default in the customer. Okay, and that'll come through. Then on the projects, when we create a new customer or new project, we'll select that customer that we were just looking at, the preferred customer. And here in the pricing tab, we can see these are our defaults, okay? And that's what came through. Now, let's go back to preferences and change this back to overtime and change this back to on-site. Okay, so that's our default. Now we'll go back to that customer again. Okay, and now it says overtime and on-site, and that's what will come through on a project. But let's say this customer has the boss says, I don't ever want to pay overtime. If you ordered it too late, that's your fault to his employee. So we know that whenever we charge that company for overtime, it's going to be called a surcharge, and the boss accepts that. Now if we go and create a new project for that customer, it'll say surcharge and it'll say on-site. Okay? So we can set those whatever we want. Now further, here on this job, let's say for some reason they don't want to call it on-site. So they can call this rapid service, and that doesn't change the customer. Okay? The customer will still be, surcharge and on-site. Okay? Now, do you want to get into how those are applied? Oh yeah, because you've got overriding. Well, in customers. Okay, so that's overriding them. Okay, do you want to see an example of how they're applied in a project? Can we do that?
I can see it in the example.
Okay, but so there's much more to it. That's only the start of something. Then right now they're not applied. So okay, let's go here. Let's turn these off. Okay, so right now we have it's just the regular price for the crates, but we want to charge a surcharge, and it's going to add the surcharge and increase the total. And let's say we want to add the on-site, and it'll add that, and we had a negative cost for on-site, so it'll change the totals. Then there's options to print it as a separate line item or include it in the totals. And then some people will apply it only to materials, and some people will apply it to the whole cost of the crate. Okay? And that's how they apply. But it's very different. This is one of the key features of the software. Okay, let's go into users now. Okay, the users that we put in here are only as a sample. They're not intended for the customer to keep them in there when they get it. They're intended to delete it and then just add their own new employees. Okay, privileges work in a couple of different ways. One is we have roles, the role that a person can fill. And the roles associate most directly with the home screens. It's not going to come up on mine. They associate most directly with the home screens that the users can use. And then yeah, it was grovelly. I didn't hear the first part that you said, but yeah. So if somebody, let's say they're a manager and a designer, and they're not an administrator. So whatever here, let me change this because we want to assume it's not a manager. So these actually would just be Bob and Joe and Segar or whatever. Okay, so let's go into this person. Let's go into the foreman. And let's say, so he's a foreman, that's his role. But let's say that he can also get in and be a designer. So he can get into designs. And he's interested in designs. So this is a hierarchy from the lowest level person or the last person in the chain up to the highest level person. So right now, if I go home as a user, I'll go to the designer screen. If I'm not a designer, but let's say I'm a foreman and assembler, and I go home, I'll go to the foreman screen. So it's whatever the highest level is. Okay? And these affect the workflow, because within these ranges, people's home screens are customized for that job. And then they can go, let's say he's a foreman and a sawyer. This person can go to the foreman home screen and the sawyer home screen. So, and each one of them is optimized for that role. Okay. Now, let's say here also in privileges, so these are a little bit more descriptive and specific. So first off, we just have inventory, customers, users, preferences, and reports. Okay. So we have some of these modules, and they're just full access or no access. So right now, this person can't get into any of those. If I want them to get into users, they can do that. Okay, wouldn't make sense for this person, but maybe they can run reports. Okay, anything with a B next to it is automatically inherited by a bookkeeper. You notice these gray out, the ones with the B. So if somebody's a bookkeeper, that's all that matters to get into the ones with the B. Okay, let's go to designs. So viewing designs is the first requirement. So if you can't view them, you can't get into it. See pricing, if that's not checked, then you can't see any pricing in there. It's all masked. So you're not privileged to the pricing. Or profits, maybe you can see the selling price, but you can't see how much the company makes. So you can hide that. The person can add designs, delete designs, export them, or modify them. So somebody maybe can add and delete designs, but they can't change them. And then with projects, I'm going to remove this one. Sorry, that shouldn't be there. So I don't know, with screen capture, maybe you can just mask it. So we have the same thing here with projects design, viewing them, seeing price, its profits, add, delete, export, and modify the ID. So in projects, a lot of companies may want to have their own numbering. I'll look at that. Okay, so we'll just take it at that somebody can modify that ID for projects. So a lot of people have a different project management system, and it creates the numbers. So they want that system to number it for them. Now, modify stages. So this determines from within projects only, not from the home screens. The home screens people can do whatever their role is. But from within projects, if somebody can modify the different stages. So if something's in processing, can they put it into production? Or can they take it out of production and put it in processing? Okay, and that's the stage, which is a higher level than the status. Okay, so let's go back to projects. We have here stage status. And I'm not going to go through all of this. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it's kind of laid out here. So projects have a stage and a status, and then the line items also have a stage. And only the one of customer. You notice there's a big blank area up here. So this is written to be ready for our customer's customer to use it, but we can't quite do that yet. So we need to take out any references to it. Apparently I missed that one. Okay, so just real quickly, so we talked about the roles, and let's look at the foreman, for example. So we have something that's in processing. What color was stage? In processing. Oh, okay, he doesn't have access to processing. Sorry about that. Okay, you notice these colors up here? And it changes a little bit there. And then as you go into it, the color changes to help identify where you are, and it matches these colors. Okay, let me go back home, and I have to do it a different way since I'm the developer. And go to projects. Now, I'm going to take this project and I'm going to put it, right now it's in working status. And the stage is processing. And these are in processing. Okay, I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them into production. And when I put them into production, then all of these will go to the next phase, which is that they're released. That means they're released to the floor. Now, there's a couple of ways to work with them. Let me go back to being the foreman for a second. So as a foreman, the release was yellow. So we go to yellow, and here's all of our crates that were released. Okay? And we can say, okay, we want to move all of these, or let's just say we're going to move this one, and we can put it back and hold. Say there's a problem with this one. I got a question on it. We can put it on hold. And now let's go ahead and send the rest of them to cutting. And we have a little notch here to tell us where we are. So cutting sends them to the next step. Now, as a foreman, I can go in and move them back and forth. And you know what I miss? I can take all of them that are in cutting, and let's say they're done cutting and the sawyer just came to me. I can move them, oops, I have to select the records. Okay, I can move them to assembly and go to assembly and say, well, wait a minute, this one wasn't cut yet. So I can move it back to cutting. And now let's go back to the project. And you can see in the project that these are all changing. So we have one on hold, one in the cutting, and two in assembly. Now, as somebody who has access to projects, I can go in also and say, well, wait, these aren't in assembly, these are done. I know everybody went to lunch, but they were done. So they're just complete. So people don't have to use all of these. They can, if they have staff on the floor that can change them and have home screens, then they can do that. Some people just want to do it all here. Okay. Now, they can do it individually if they want, or they don't have to deal with these at all. And they can just go, when they're done, say, okay, everything's done and it's closed. And that means these are filled. And now if I go to put in an invoice, okay, if I go to put in an invoice, it's going to put in today's date, and then it's going to change it to invoiced. And then it could be paid if we want to track that. Now, I have privileges to move everything around, so let me just put everything back in production here. And let's put this one in packing, and this one in inspection, and let's make this one complete, and this one complete. Now let me go to another project. Okay, and we've got a couple more here, and let's say they're paid. They're all done. Okay? So we've got a couple of projects here, and one is in various stages, the other one is complete. Now let's go to our reporting and look, and we can see We have our stages and statuses. Okay, and let me see, you said, okay, you had some in processing. Okay, now we have some in production, and you have to look at the date range. Let's see here, I need to experiment with something. And let's send this to a PDF. And this is, again, a little slower because of the software. Okay. So we have one right now. And this is ready to print. So we can continue and print it. But there's our report. Okay. Let me close that. So that was kind of my experiment. And let's go back, I don't know how far, May 1st. Should be far enough. Added 520. Okay. Status. Okay. Projects. Oh, okay. We may only have one in production. Okay. So this is projects for these two. Okay. Let's look at what was created in that range. Okay. And we have 3 of them that were created, 2 are in working, and only 1 is in production. Okay. So we should have 2 here. Okay. We should have 2 there. As far as your documentation, you can just put that down. So when the status is working, ordered, or hold, then that's what should show up for the projects. All right, let's jump over here. I'm glad we're doing this because this is definitely good for me. Okay, this is the line items that are in production. Now, I know that we have more than that. Didn't mean to click there. Okay, we have, okay, we actually do only have 1 in production. So the status, this job is in production. Okay, so our reports aren't wrong. The problem is that we're testing with very little data, or documenting with very little data. And without having things through all the stages and statuses, it's hard to do this. So we have 1 status, project status of paid, 1 production, and 1 working with nothing on it. Okay, this one, we have 1 thing that's in packing. So that's the only design that's in production. We have 1 in inspection, which is final. And we have 2 that are complete. I don't think you can see those pop-ups. Okay, so let's go back to reports. Close this. Okay, back to reports. Okay, and we have designs in final. So there's more of our designs. And I think we had 1 in filled. We have 2 in filled. Okay, so there's 2 more. So not getting the results is based on not having that much data in there. So do you understand how those work now? You think you'll, with the video? Okay, great. Okay, And then by dates, we have the date that it was created, the date that it's due, the date it's complete. And we have in there a destination deadline date, which is when it has to be at the destination by. Okay, now these reports, I'm not going to get into these two much because we're not doing ISPM now, or if we do later, we'll do that. Okay, date filters applied to material and pieces. Reports are based on the date each item passed a predetermined status. Okay, see preferences and settings for more detail. Okay, so this is materials and pieces that are complete. Right, let's go to preferences and settings, and design status when inventory becomes dedicated, status to place designs in when changing project status to final. So the point of this is, I think I mentioned sometime prior that there are three phases that most inventory is considered to go through. So you have raw materials, you have work in process, and then you have finished goods. So work in process is anything that's not done yet. Now, different countries and sometimes different companies report their inventory differently. So for profit reasons, reporting profit within the company, there's only something that you haven't used yet and something you have, that you've used and built something. So there is no in-between. So a company has to decide what happens to that in-between stuff. So is it part of the raw materials or is it part of their finished product? How do they have to account for it? Separate from that, ISPM15 has to be reported to an inspector. And different countries or different inspectors will have different rules for that. So they can decide at what point for ISPM 15 that something becomes, a material becomes dedicated. So when do they say it's used? Okay, so we'll go back to reports here and do a material report. Okay, and here's all of the materials in that range. Do you know the difference between the materials and the pieces? Okay, and then we can sort by any of these, and the sorting changes. Okay? Okay, you understand this part? Great. And then you can filter it by customer or project, and then that'll limit it. You can also pick, I don't know if you can see this. Oh, yes, you can see the pop-up. Okay. Okay, we skipped over something, and okay, the manager's information report, or manager's report. Do you remember where you saw manager's information report? In customers? I'm not sure, but I don't think so. I don't think that would apply to a customer. It's in designs, and it may be in projects. Let me see. Okay, print and email. Okay, manager's report. Okay, if you see the manager's information report again, if you can just send me a message and let me know where. Okay, so we just want to view the report. We don't want to print it. Okay, in projects, we get something a little bit different than in designs, because a project is a collection of many designs. We have the list of designs on this project, or the material, and then the hours for each. Let me fix. Okay, in designs, the manager's report is only for one design. So for design, then we have room for all of the individual materials. And then we have similar information off to the left here. So this is generally a report, an overview for a manager. Okay. And there probably is manager's information report in there somewhere because that's what we used to call it. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed the Zoom percentage for users. Oh, you know what? I didn't make this bigger. Can you see it okay? Okay. All right, what I usually do, since I'm not logged in as a user, I can't do it like a user can. But if I'm a user and I want this bigger, so let's say I'm the administrator, I can zoom and make it 150%. Now, when I log out and then log back in, everything will be this big for me. Okay? And then as I navigate around, it'll still be 150% of normal. Now, since I'm not logged in as a user, I can't do that. But that's for that user. So right now it's the foreman that I changed. So if foreman logs in, his screen will be zoomed this big. And let's say somebody's got really good eyes, or they've got a very sharp monitor, they could make it this big. And if the monitor is really crisp, then that's fine. Okay, so that's zooming, and then every time they log in, that's the size it's going to be for them. Okay, we did the reports. Okay. Okay, do you want to go over ISPM15? Okay, let me go ahead and stop this recording, and then I'll start another one.